Welcome back to Natural 2, our D&D and tabletop role-playing podcast and talk show. I am Nathan, joined with the lovely James, and today we are discussing, or not discussing, I guess this is the video that you potentially have been sent or shared regarding rules lawyers, or rule lawyering. I don't think that's a term, but we'll go with it. And how that can potentially become a friction at the table. It can impede on other players' fun, and why some of that behavior might be curved, or some of it should be necessary in some extents. But yeah, James, you have any thoughts to kick us off with, sir?
Just whether you've seen our previous videos in this series or not, I want to include right at the beginning that if you are receiving this video in the actual way that it is intended, you're not just watching because you're watching YouTube, you're watching us, although that's wonderful, that's great, keep it up. But if you've actually been sent this video, don't let it upset you.
Mhm.
You've received this video because your group or someone in it wants to keep you at the table and is just trying to improve the experience for everybody. It is not it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not a jab. Some kind of a low-key insult. Don't think of it that way. It's always hard to communicate things that are not always positive across the board and warm and fuzzy and happy. And so that's why we're doing this. We're communicating for you, or for someone else.
I'm sure it's a little obnoxious to have the disclaimer at the beginning of all these sorts of videos, but it really comes down to criticism is not always supposed to be some sort of insult. It's not supposed to try and get you agitated. Criticism can be levied in a very heartfelt way, I suppose. And the best way I've always kind of framed our conversations with these style of videos is trying to understand both sides and express I guess, the appearance of each side from the other person's perspective. Because at the end of the day, I don't think either party is trying to do anything intentionally wrong or harm your fun in some sort of intentional way. It's just their way of going about something might not line up with somebody else's expectation. And that's really the baseline of it, but we are now focusing more finely on the rules and how they incorporate in this lovely hobby of ours.
That's right. So let's start. I think it's important to start with a definition of terms.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the rules lawyer, as we understand it, is someone who is not the DM. I think that is the first part of the definition, and it's essential. I don't think the DM, by definition, can be the rules lawyer.
He's the rule judge.
Right. So it's a player who is perhaps burning time at the table in session, in game, arguing about the DM's rulings, or using his or her knowledge of the rules to browbeat or otherwise put pressure on other people at the table. And I think that we can also sort of tack on that this may be someone who is, in the spirit of helpfulness, kind of on another player's back about their choices being suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
That there's some overlap there with our previous subject, but I think that it could apply here too. But the focus is someone who is undermining the DM by belaboring the finer mechanical points of the game.
Yeah, I think the way that it most commonly shows up, as you mentioned, is you were kind of wasting time or pulling attention or I guess potentially spoiling some sort of scene or aspect of the game because you're so fixated on the rules that the game or the group or the story being told is kind of pushed to the wayside, which is at least as far as I'm aware, never really the goal when you sit down and play D&D. And I think the best way to, like, good faith explain how people fall into that situation without, I guess, understanding that they are causing this problem is you enjoy knowing the rules. You always want to be proficient at something you enjoy and that you spend time in. And there's nothing wrong with knowing the rules incredibly well, knowing them in and out, using them effectively, kind of referring again to our power gamer conversation we had previously. But there is the point where your, I don't want to say obsession, but your fixation on making sure the rules are abided by 100% by the books to the T, every aspect, every step of the way, there are going to be people who don't want that in your group. And why I can understand you want to at least play the same game that you kind of read the books on and have all the rule understandings of, there is that wiggle room. Like the rule of cool is kind of something in the spectrum of nothing is ever going to be perfect, but you are going to still more or less play the rules as you understand them. And so trying to sit there and battle on those very finite things that don't ultimately matter, I think is where the biggest issue of this kind of comes up. Because I don't think it is a bigger problem in the main things, like when the DM disregards the rules entirely and just kills your character for no reason. That's when there's no real rules lawyer. That's when the group grabs their pitchforks and starts stabbing the DM. And so I think it's that really small gray area of like wanting to play this very mechanically rules as written game and then playing a game that the rest of the group might want to kind of be a little bit more free form with.
So the first piece of advice that I think I would have for you who may have been sent this video is that your knowledge of the mechanics is a virtue. That is not what that it, as far as I'm concerned, is not being questioned. What's important to remember is that it's an investment that not everyone at the table may have had a chance to make. If you're playing with newer players or busy players, if you have come by your knowledge by being, a very experienced player, we don't want to make people feel insignificant or less important because they're still learning. And some of these things are better discovered on your own or for yourself. And also to make sure that in order for the game to work, the players have to respect the DM. And so in your desire to be helpful or in wanting things to be done the right way, bear in mind that you need to respect the DM's rulings. If you really have a problem you just can't let go of, that really is best done out of session, probably in private. And you also don't want to undermine confidence in the DM, either from the other players or the DM himself. DMing is hard. It's the weight of the entire imaginary world on your shoulders, and nobody gets things right all the time. Mm-hmm. So give some margin of error always. And again, if there's something that's just really bothering you or you can't let go of, or it's affecting the way that you play, it's affecting your fun, that is the right time to take it out of session, away from the table. Let the ruling in the moment stand.
This might be a little bit of a tangent, but I think it very much encapsulates a lot of the first piece of advice that most rules lawyers get is, oh, save it for after the session, bring it up then, which is a very solid piece of advice. But I think there's a little bit more complexity to it. our group, I would never say is like a perfect group, obviously, but there's a lot of things that I enjoy about our group that I think we do very well. I think currently one of the things that we do extremely well is understanding when to clarify rules, push rules, ask questions, look it up later, let a second player look it up as the DM is continuing the story. There's a lot of kind of natural flow that we've fallen into as a group that allows us to keep the game moving, but also be more or less accurate to the rules, or be very close and then clarify it later. What I think that the piece of advice of wait to the end of session to bring it up is kind of a limited utility, is a lot of time there are things in game that will be very consequential if not addressed right then. Something that might lead to your character's death, something might lead to a TPK, something that might be very, very important, right? And there's, I wouldn't say it's out there for the player or the rules lawyer, to use the term in this case, to pipe up and be like, no, 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 we can't rule this way because X, Y, Z, and if this happens, then the game's kind of over to an extent. And so if it's a situation like that, it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not incorrect of you to kind of stop the session, pause the session, try and clarify this thing, but there is a proper way of going about it where you're not coming out to be the aggressor, you're not coming out to kind of like show your superiority or kind of dominate the situation. You are trying to make sure that the ruling is clear, that everyone is understanding what is going on, and then moving forward from there. And that's, I think, the key moment of not leaving it for after session, is you have to, a bit of social grace, a little bit of reading the room, I think is the best way to try and conceptualize this. Is if you start arguing a point or you start putting your case forward, if the rest of the group is like, yeah, sure, but nah, then it's dying on that hill is probably not going to achieve any good outcome for anybody involved. But if you start putting forward the ideas, start discussing the rules, bringing up, I don't want to say your arguments, that kind of puts you in the combative zone. If everyone else is like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Or, oh, you know, I thought it was this other thing. Then it's very easy to move on and be like, okay, sorry, my mistake. We'll roll back whatever that issue was and move forward. And that, again, I think is something that we do very well, and I think would benefit everybody as a whole. And just try and remember, if you are the person kind of bringing up a rules discrepancy, that that's the goal, is to bring it up, clarify it, and move on, versus bringing it up, you know, making sure that it was, you know, made clear that you brought it up and you corrected it, and this is how it is. Don't you know this is how it is? That's usually not the best way to go about it.
If you're asking 3 times, it's probably too many. Once is what you should be doing most of the time. Twice if it's something really important, like you were just saying, and then stop. You know, you either accept the ruling has been made or bring it up outside of the game, in my opinion.
I do want to throw out there that I've had quite the spectrum of players in my very limited time of playing D&D more specifically, and I've had those that at the end of sessions will send me a small novel about what rulings I did not get exactly precise and what things could have been better, and critiques of certain handlings of situations, which there were benefits of. I very much sometimes enjoyed sitting there and being like, oh yeah, I didn't even catch that. It's good to now be aware of this. But it also was kind of draining. You know, every time we ended the session, I would wait. I would set my egg timer, an hour later, the message would pop up, and it's like, yep. So another, I guess, piece of information or advice to put forward is every group is going to handle rulings differently, and we roll this piece of advice out a lot in a lot of our different videos of like finding the right group, finding people you jive with, making sure you are in the environment that you want to play in. But I mean, it's such a, like, you can't get past that advice because it really is essential. If you find yourself in a group that don't care about the rules and you love the rules, there's an incompatibility there, and either you have to be ready to make compromises or find a group that thinks the rules are hot shit like you do. Like, that's something that is probably going to be a point of friction for people being sent this video as well. in my personal opinion, and this is again very subjective of me, I think that it is always better to enjoy the friends you are playing with, the story that you are telling, the memories you are forging, versus making sure that the extra 2 points of damage that you were going to cause works, or that your stealth roll was done accurately, or that you had this one more lucky feat. Like, yeah, those things can lead to things that the group will remember down the road, but I would wager probably not as often as you would think. So that would be my kind of subjective advice, is just enjoy the game. Rules are important, but not the end of the world. Unless it is the end of the world.
I have been playing D&D a lot. I have played other systems quite a bit as well. And my point in saying that is that I've got a pretty good head for mechanics and for the rules, if I say so myself. And also it's faster and easier than it's ever been to look up things that you're not sure about. What I'm getting at is, I know the rules better than average, I think. And so when something doesn't sound quite right, or like it matches up, let's say with what's in the book, not right or wrong, but matches more or less closely,
Mm-hmm.
It'll jump out at me a little bit, and I pick up on it, and sometimes I'll look it up for myself quietly, just out of curiosity. But it is a tiny fraction of the time that I actually will say something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not going to affect the flow, if it's not going to meaningfully change the encounter, if the spirit of what is happening is still intact, what's the point? You know, it was close enough. Close enough is usually enough.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the time. And I know there are personalities out there, there are people out there that's like nails on a chalkboard. But that's
You think close enough got people on the moon, James?
right. But that's part of being on a team, is trying to give other people the room to play and to grow and to have fun. So that's probably in summary what I would say about this is, you know, you can have, at the end of the night, when it's all said and done, you can enjoy privately that moment of, I was right. I know what the right answer is. But I don't have to rub anybody's nose in it.
Mm-hmm. If you allow me, James, I would like to hold you up as kind of the golden boy example as a rules lawyer. Back when we were starting his millionth adventures, it was the dynamic that I kind of found us falling into, and feel free to disagree with me if this is incorrect. I was very unfamiliar with running D&D past like 1 or 2 sessions, because up until that point I've been playing with like family and friends and like, never actually having a meaningful campaign. So my understanding of beyond level 4 was non-existent. Balancing things, ruling things, feats, spells, all that stuff kind of up in that spectrum of play. And so we also had 3 brand new players in our group that were learning the rules right alongside with me. And while I usually describe it as I have a good general idea of where to land the rules and then clarifying it later, kind of what you were describing earlier, I am not proficient at like the exact wording of like, is it an action to dismount? Can you use this as a free action or use it for a bonus action? Like very kind of minuscule, finite things I am not certain on. So you kind of fell into this mock vague co-DM role where we would start a turn and someone would go to do something and I'm like, that doesn't sound right, but we'll roll with it for now. And I would look over and you're already sitting there typing or flipping your book open. And then, oh, I just hit my desk. And then I would look over and then you would have some clarification for me. And I very much appreciated that because you weren't bringing it up to kind of show your knowledge. You weren't bringing it up to demean the other players. You were trying to add, clarify, make things flow. And you were doing it in this very, I don't want to say subdued way, but I guess that's the right term for it, where you would figure it out, clarify, do the quick research, and then present it to the class. I guess is the best way to describe it. And that worked incredibly well, and I'm a better DM for it, so I appreciate that, sir.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's always nice to know that when you're not being annoying, and doing it in the spirit of helpfulness and not in proving that you're right, is what that's about. And also we pretty early on, I feel like reached an understanding. And you know, that rapport or that back and forth of knowing, like, it's okay for me to look this up and interject it, because I'm not going to pull focus. It really just is about, you know, for future reference or you know, fixing a little issue. And on the flip side of that, if you are the DM and you're watching this video before you consider sending it to somebody, or you're just watching this video because you watch our videos, and thank you very much, like, subscribe and comment, ask that person for advice or clarification. It's gratifying, you know. It's good to have that acknowledgement of, you know, either knowing something or knowing how to find it. There's a piece of advice that I saw in a TV show, and I'm not going to say which show because it would sound probably really lame to everybody.
If you know the show, comment below so we can embarrass James.
But yeah, we'll make a game out of it. If you guess right, then you'll get something. I don't know. Probably not.
Our undying appreciation.
Yeah, YouTube's rules on that is I haven't looked them up, so you probably won't get anything. But the advice was, how do you apologize? How does one man apologize to another man? I don't think it needs to be a gendered thing. I think it works, you know, for anybody. Is to ask them for advice or ask them for a favor. So that's a great way to build some a relationship with somebody at the table. If you know that they've got this knowledge or this aspect of themselves that they're looking these things up, reading them independently, that kind of thing, then you can use that and reward that by when you have a good opportunity to be like, hey, what is the right way to rule this? Or I haven't looked up the grapple rules in forever. Do you know what they are? That it's great. Warm fuzzies all around.
I think my final little piece of advice, and it sounds like we're getting close to our conclusion, the number one tool in my DM toolkit in regards to rules lawyer, which I don't think is a problem in our group, but I still use this tool rather often, is the does that sound fair? It's a very simple and effective tool of when I don't know what the fuck I'm doing and I'm trying to figure out how to make a ruling on the fly, I go with my gut instinct and I lay it out before the court of the players and go, does that sound fair? And more often than not, they go, yeah, that sounds fair, because usually I'm lambasting myself, but you know, that's the DM's wet dream. So that is more or less, I think, my last piece of advice. If it's a DM watching this dealing with a rules lawyer, try that tactic, because if you do present it to them and they agree to something on the fly that isn't in the rules, you get away scot-free. So
And there's two things in 5e D&D specifically. I think 99% of our advice here in this video is system agnostic, but in 5e D&D, there are two things that I do want to highlight before we close, and it's my final thought. Number one is that the DMG states unequivocally that DM's rulings are the rules. You know, the rulings of the DM supersede any other rule. So in that, if you're going to be a rules lawyer, be a rules lawyer about all the rules, including that one. But also that 5e with advantage and disadvantage and a couple of other of the finer mechanics that the table has access to lends itself to improvising and doing things on the fly. So that they knew that having a perfect encyclopedic knowledge or being able to read the minds of the game designers isn't ever going to be the case. And so with those two interactions, those two things should be top of the list, top of mind whenever there's a rules question. Is it's the DM's call, and even if it isn't totally rules accurate, like you said, it's probably fair still, or fair enough. So don't sweat it.
Oh man, we gotta do a video on send this to your DMs that like murdering you, or like use the rules to like beat you over the head, because I don't understand those people. That's a rough one. I don't know. I might get heated on that topic.
Maybe. Well, we might have to do a video discussing it and then do a video for that person.
Yeah,
just to really get all of the wrinkles out.
Because rules lawyers, or at least the ill feelings that rules lawyers can cause, don't just come from players. You can have rule lawyer DMs that just love wielding the power like a freaking what's the word? Like a cretin is the.
They're activist rules judges. They're not making they're not doing their sentencing based on precedent. They're
like a 12-year-old with a hammer. Actually, well, probably 12 is too much.
I could sit here making court metaphors all night, but hopefully that's been helpful. Again, really do want you to comment where you think we're out of line, or what you agree with, or what we missed. Put it down there, and like and subscribe and ring the bell and all that happy jazz. It really is necessary. And that's all I've got.
If you need free maps, there's a store with free maps down below. Feel free to explore and use them to your heart's content. But that is about all the plugs that I have to give.
If you want to show your support, I think that they have the option to...
Oh no, put the tin cup away, sir.
Kick something your way. Hey, I have played on some of these maps. They're good maps.
We're never going to get into the map that we used last week.
We got our post credits aside here. The last couple of map making videos are maps that we played on like the corner.
We used in the most slim term of the word.
So there you go. It's a gently used map. It's worth something. So until next time,
have a good one.